Hi, welcome to my channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today is, Sunday the 9th of April, still. This is my second video for today. And today I'm going to talk about putting the Battle of Bakhmut into perspective. So if you're interested in what I have to say, please continue watching. Welcome back to the channel. We've been, not me, but a lot of pro-Russians and pro-Western commentators have talked about Bakhmut for the last, the whole year, basically. And even before that. And every day we are told that Bakhmut is going to fall and Russia has conquered Bakhmut, and then no, it didn't happen, and then no, they're now in the outskirts of Bakhmut, and then they are in the middle, and no. But it seems to be finally the Russians have taken over Bakhmut, and it's being admitted by the Ukrainians. Everybody is speculating about Bakhmut. Everybody is trying to put an explanation on what is happening there and why and so forth. And it's Ukrainians are losing excessive equipment and troops in that field, using up its reserves, etc., etc. And you know, I'm not sure. I don't actually know what to say about all these statements, because in my opinion, it's bollocks. It all depends on how you define casualties, losses. And in my opinion, if you kill 30 people, that's not a huge loss. Not in a war. If you lose 100 men, no. Even if you lose 1,000 men, yes. In terms of life loss, in terms of someone's son or father or brother, or it's terrible. Make no way. But we're not talking about that emotional contents. We are talking about numbers, concepts, pure unemotional type of assessments. Even if the Ukrainians have lost 10,000 men in Bakhmut, it's still not enough to make a huge impact. If you have lose 10,000 men in 10 places along the front, that's something totally different. If you lose 10 tanks, no. 50 tanks is starting to be a little bit more. Of course, tanks are big and expensive and bulky and difficult to manufacture, and etc., etc. But in the context of the whole war, what do the people usually show you? A person like Brian Berletic, what does he always do? He brings up the map of Ukraine, and then you see the whole front line. And we have talked about it, that's about more than 1,000 kilometers. And then you start zooming in. And you zoom in, and you zoom in, and you zoom in, and then you have to search, where's Bakhmut? Now, just the state of the amount of zooming you have to do tells you how big and important is this whole battle. It's just a small part of the front line where two forces are fighting. Now let's put it in another perspective. So we have Bakhmut, who apparently has a pre-war population of 70,000 people. And then on the Russian side, we have the Wagner group. Now, how big is the Wagner group? Well, don't know. But let's say they are, a brigade. That's what they call it, the brigade. or say 4,000 or 5,000 men. And in support, you have the Russian artillery people. But the fighting force is about, say, 4,000 or 5,000 men. And in my opinion, that is optimistic. Then the narrative goes that on the Ukrainian side, they have about 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers defending Bakhmut. So what you have is you have 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers versus 5,000 Wagner Group soldiers in a town that can only hold 70,000 people, which effectively means that take the 20,000 people with 70,000, so the Ukrainians are in each house over 1/3 of the town. So 1/3 of the houses of the town is occupied by a Ukrainian soldier. That is what they are telling us. Surely that doesn't sound lekker. Surely it doesn't sound to us realistic. And why would you put 20,000 men into a town that is full of rubble, that is constantly bombarded, that cannot see the enemy? It doesn't even shoot an enemy, well, in certain aspects, because the Ukrainians have also thrown artillery on the Wagner Group soldiers, and according to Poroshenko, I'm very bad with names, you know that by now, says that he has also suffered significant casualties. But what does significant casualty mean? If Wagner tells me he has lost 1,500 men of his 4,000 men, I said that is significant. If he lost 100 men, no. 200 men, no. From 500 men, I'm starting to get worried. I would start to say, yeah, right, that's, you can say you had some casualties. But even that is not enough. Not in the context of the war. In context of life, emotional, terrible. That's it. But we always talk about Bakhmut. And Zelensky is forcing the Ukrainians to spend a lot of his armor, his reserves on these units. When we talk about reserves, what are we talking about? I mean, so we have a small, let me just get this article here. So, hey, I'm going to get the right name here. Prigozhin. Sorry. The Wagner Group leader, Prigozhin. That's right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I told you I'm bad with names. Many times. Don't quote me. In any case, he said that according to the PMC Wagner, in the area of Bakhmut, Konstantinovka, Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, and Truskova, there are about 80,000 Ukrainian personnel, 280 tanks, 1,000 armored vehicles, up to 300 pieces of barreled artillery, as well as 93 multiple rocket launchers. And these are apparently the forces that are going to do a counter-offensive Bakhmut and reconquer it, or basically drive the Wagner Group out. And that was said by Prigozhin. And the Ukrainians have prepared about 200,000 reserve personnel, and it also received a large amount of NATO equipment. And this is all for a small town. Now, I listened to a video of Judge Napolitano with Colonel McGregor. And in this, I'm not going to blame it. I'm going to stop about that. I told you many times. I'm not going to criticize him. But what he said, McGregor said that the Russians had this brilliant strategy of not attacking the Ukrainian forces and let the Ukrainian forces come to them, and then they basically bombard them with artillery, and this is the war of attrition, and this is how they're going to grind down the Ukrainian military offense or military itself. But I've talked many times about this one article I read about the POSOM military strategy, where it was clearly explained that Ukraine cannot, and that was like in 1993, and the numbers differed, which is, it's more in favor today in terms of Russia than it was at that stage. It was clear where the 3 defensive lines could be established, and the current one was the best option at that stage. And if this line of defense falls, Ukrainians can fall back until on the other side of the Dnieper River, and then back a little bit further. And the strategy would be to defend these lines, let the Russians attack. But this whole defensive strategy wouldn't be successful for the Ukrainians if the Russians decided not to attack. Now, if a strategic analyst can set up a defensive position for the Ukrainian forces against a Russian attack, then firstly, the Russian would have read it, and secondly, they would have come to the same conclusions, and then they would have realized they shouldn't attack. And I've talked about many times about this, but Colonel McGregor thinks that was a brilliant strategy from Shoreviken, is that the general's name? It was a brilliant strategy from his side. No, it was, in my opinion, a common sense, because at the end of the day, the attacker always loses more men than the defender. And as long as the Ukrainians are prepared to attack and the Russians to defend from good positions off, then it will be a slow grind and a slow killing process, elimination process of the Ukrainian armed forces and the equipment. And that's why everybody talks like a meat grinder. Then we have this talk about always 200 men, 300 men lost by the Ukrainians per day. Now, over the whole front or only in Bakhmut? No, over the whole front of 1,000 kilometers, of which Bakhmut is only a small part. Even think about the reserves, the accumulated 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers spread over 4 towns, cities. I'm not sure how big they are. If you look at the map that Brian always shows you, that it shows you the location sometimes of where the Ukrainian units are, and they're spread over the whole country. There's a lot of reserves. There's a lot of other in the west, middle, and on the front, spread in various towns and so on. So Bakhmut is only part of the story. And now we come to the counteroffensive, the announced counteroffensive of the Ukrainian forces. That is supposed to happen end of this last month. Then it has to happen next month, this month, and then it has to be the month after that. And nobody really knows. And Zelensky says he doesn't have enough weapons and so on to do the counteroffensive. And in my opinion, this whole idea of a counteroffensive is the most ridiculous idea, because the Ukrainians cannot be successful. If you look at last year's counteroffensive, they mostly attacked in the Kherson area. And though they gained a little bit of ground, they did lose a lot of armament, hardware, and soldiers. For the amount of effort that they put in, they couldn't break through the Russian defensive line. The only successes they had was in the north, at Kharkiv, because Liman and Izium. But there were no Russians to defend it. So that is normal, that is totally acceptable or expected. But this time it's not like that. There are no weak points in the Russian defensive lines, not in my opinion. Okay, we don't know where the Russians units are. We know where the Ukrainian units are, but not where the Russians are. But like I always said, if I can think about that, and if you can think about it, then the Russian command has definitely thought about it, and some more. Because they are sitting there, they know what they're doing, they're better trained than us. We can only guess and estimate and speculate and stuff like that. But I believe the Russians learned their lessons from the Lehman-Izium success of Ukraine. And so the weekend, in my opinion, like I said, when he withdrew from Kherson City, he consolidated the forces, he consolidated command, he set up the necessary defensive positions, and a lot of defensive positions were created as fallbacks in the Donbass, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson Oblast. We know of a lot of trenches that were built, not only trenches for soldiers, but trenches for tanks, to stop tanks, minefields, stuff like that. Those were probably built in order to have pre-prepared defensive positions. So, if you think about that, the Ukrainians will do a counter-offensive in the Zaporizhzhia area, then when they concentrate the forces, the Russians will know about that. Because they have intelligence gathering systems, and very good ones. They have satellite. They will know what is happening and when. And Zaporizhzhia, I believe the defensive positions are well prepared. Same on the Kherson side. That's not going to happen because they have to cross the river. Then we have the north. That is also very well protected. Though there are small battles, Russians are slowly gaining territory, not that much, but that's not important for them. And then we have the middle section. And then there was this one guy, I think his name is Russ. He comes from Texas, volunteered in 2014 for the Donbass militia, and then stayed the whole last 8 years. And he wrote this article, and he says basically, well, the force concentration of the Ukrainians are in the Bakhmut area and Donetsk area, and they're not far away. And what the counteroffensive would be is to attack on that line and try to occupy Donetsk city. And he puts a hell of a lot of military options on the table, which I can't agree with that. And I'm sure that the Russians also think about this. But even in this last 8 years, the Ukrainian forces could never enter Donetsk city itself, only on the outskirts. And now with the Russian forces and support there, what do you think is going to happen? And when you enter these things, then there's urban warfare. And urban warfare is a very costly effect operation, and it's a slow operation. So it will slow down. And whatever Russians' reserves have been placed wherever, that will give the Russian reserves more than enough time to assist and start to defend, move to the point of defense, wherever the counter-offensive occurred, and then enter the town. And basically drive back the Ukrainians. But the point still has to be asked, why are the Ukrainians even considering a counter-attack? What they should be doing is basically build up defensive positions. Gather armament and ammunition and build up your reserves in terms of hardware and ammunition. Get your men trained to restore the army to the correct size as a trained unit. buy some time. That is what the Ukrainians basically need to do. But they say that they have to do this in order to convince their supporters, which is the USA and Europe, to provide them with armament. And they are only given this armament if the Ukrainians start a counteroffensive and if they are successful. But it's like, okay, listen here, go kill that that boar or that lion, and once you have killed it, I will give you the rifle. What's the point then? I need the rifle to kill the tiger or the lion before I kill him, not after I killed him with my bare hands. And what's the point in that? And doing the battle, just kill the lion or the tiger just to show you I am brave enough to do it, that's also stupid. So this whole affair of a counteroffensive, the whole idea of that is military unwise. You will only be able to basically inflict a lot of pain on the Russians if you have parity in terms of weapons and ammunition and manpower. And until you get that, you can forget about it. There's no point. Men will just die unnecessarily. But then on the other hand is, has the Ukrainian done anything logical by now that makes sense? No, it doesn't. How long is the Americans still going to support Ukraine? Well, they'd say the one thing, and they now send another $2.8 billion of weapons to Ukraine. But at the end of the day, you've got to listen to a little bit to the numbers. I think America has now given about $140 billion or $150 billion to the Ukraine. It has given them about $40 billion, $38 billion, so probably $40 billion in terms of physically armament and ammunition. So it leaves you with about $100 and $110 billion in spend on what? And then they came out to report that 60%, one of the senators or one of the purchasing guys told the senators, American senators, that 60% of this money actually remains in America and is given to the replacement of the ammunition that the Americans are giving them, even the Ukrainians. And that effectively means that between $60 and $70 billion has been given to the Russian, to the American military-industrial complex in order to replace weapons which were in any case placed in storage, which were in any case not used. You see the type of money laundering that's happening here, supporting the military-industrial complex to replace weapons which are obsolete, which has been sold more than a scrap value, and then they're going to be replaced by new weapons which was not required because these weapons were never used. They are obsolete and placed in storage. And then I read a report that the Pentagon was asking for $300 billion in order to replace weaponry. Somebody is bamboozling somebody else. And that's all taxpayer money, or if you want to call it more accurately, my and your money, since we are financing American lifestyle and military-industrial complex and American military ventures. We, as the rest of the world outside America. Oh, I'm sorry. The Russian-Ukraine conflict is a lot more than just Bakhmut. Bakhmut was mostly fought by the Wagner group, not even by mostly Russian troops. The 300 reserves that were called up, they are still not been deployed. Only the frontline troops were strengthened. Is that the right word? Yeah. More troops were sent in order to ensure that the whole front is properly defended. Significant defensive lines were built up. And I don't think that Russia will try to do anything until it believes that the Ukrainian army has been sufficiently, what is English? Not annihilated, reduced in fighting capability. And if anybody thinks that Ukrainians have no tanks, yes, they have the tanks. Do they still have artillery? Yes. Soviet, when we talk about Soviet, yes, they still have it. Do they still have Soviet ammunition? Yes, they still have it. Because Poland and I think Slovakia and another country do manufacture this ammunition. And they're going full house. And they're resupplying these weapons. Do they still have manpower? Yes, they have manpower. How many did they lose? Definitely not 50,000 men in Bakhmut. Are they going to do a counteroffensive? I'm not sure, but it will be a foolish exercise. Unnecessary loss of life. And it might even turn the war into the fate of Russia. That it will deteriorate the Ukrainian force to such an extent that Russia might believe that's a time for the real offense. Driving back the forces. Again, coming back to the original military strategy as proposed in 1993 by Posen. In any case, that's my story for today. So until next time, cheers.